everyone, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze's Celebrity Conversations. It is Thursday, and I am your host, Jane Roper, author of Double Time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. We are so excited to have Elissa Sloan, whose debut novel, The Unraveling of Cassidy Jones, was published on Tuesday. Super excited to learn more about it. And she's going to be interviewed by the resplendent Anna Solomon, whose latest book was The Book of V. So I will do some brief intros of you guys, and welcome to you both. First of all, thank you for being here. We have Anna's joining us from Gloucester and Elissa's joining us from Austin. And I will introduce you guys, and then I'm going to let you guys chat. Viewers, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat, and if we can, we'll pass them along to our authors if we can. So let's begin. First of all, Anna Solomon. Anna is the author of 3 novels. The Book of V, published in May, Leaving Lucy Pear, and The Little Bride, and a 2-time winner of the Pushcart Prize. Her short fiction, essays, and reviews have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Plowshares, One Story, the Boston Globe, Tablet, and elsewhere. She is the recipient of awards from MacDowell, Yaddo, Breadloaf, and Rhode Island State Council for the Arts. And her short story, The Lobster Mafia Story, was chosen as Boston's One City, One Story read. I love that title. It's just fabulous. In Anna's newest book, The Book of V, which is awesome, and I read it recently, and everybody should read it. It's really amazing. The riveting stories of 3 characters, including the biblical Queen Esther, overlap and collide, illuminating how women's lives have and have not changed over thousands of years. Publishers Weekly called The Book of V fresh and tantalizing, with fascinating intergenerational discussions about desire, duty, family, and feminism, as well as a surprising, completely believable twist. The New York Times called it engrossing, highly readable, and darkly sexy. Anna was born and raised in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 children. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
So happy you're here. And Elissa Sloan. Elissa Sloan grew up in Houston, Texas. Born to a Japanese immigrant mother and a Jewish American father, Elissa understands the importance of representation in stories and media. When she's not writing, Elissa is also an artist and professional photographer, spending the last decade shooting weddings for a living. Though she's not a gossip in real life, she loves to keep up with celebrity dirt. Her debut novel, The Unraveling of Cassidy Holmes, was born from that interest. She currently lives in Austin with her husband and 2 cats in a house with a rolling library ladder, which you can see pictures of if you follow Elissa on Instagram, along with some fabulous photos she did of herself in place of various pop stars on like iconic pop albums. So definitely follow her on Insta. Elissa's debut novel, The Unraveling of Cassidy Holmes, probes the dark side of fame after a former member of a Spice Girls-esque girl band ends her own life. And there's that gorgeous cover you can all see. Publishers Weekly says the dark side of fame is evident throughout this spirited and expertly plotted story. Sloan's debut will leave readers eagerly awaiting her next outing. Zoe Fishman, critically acclaimed author of Invisible as Air and Inheriting Edith, says, The Unraveling of Cassidy Holmes is for anyone who wondered why Britney shaved her head and attacked a car with the umbrella. I just love that. The Unraveling of Cassidy Holmes is on multiple must-read lists, including Pop Sugar's 25 books everyone will be talking about in September, Parade's Fall's most anticipated books, and Mary Claire's 2020 books you should add to your reading list. Congratulations, Elissa, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. We are so psyched to have you. So let's go. Anna, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm so honored to get to do this with you, Elissa. Congratulations. The Unraveling of Cassidy Jones came out Tuesday. Is that correct?
Yes, it came out 2 days ago.
Okay. So what did you do in this very special time that we're living in to celebrate?
Well, I was able to wake up and go to Book People, my local indie, and sign books that people had pre-ordered, which was really fun. It was my first signing experience. So I was just like enjoying it a lot. And then I had a launch event with Gibson's Bookstore in New Hampshire that evening. And in between, I ate ice cream for lunch and just basically dealt with social media. It was a barrage of well-wishers congratulating me. So that took hours. I was really surprised how much time it took to respond to everybody. But I feel like it's really important to respond to people who are giving you well wishes. So
I totally agree. It's weird. It's like a very good problem to have, right? But then you're sort of like, this is actually really exhausting.
Yes, it's time consuming. And I was so tired that night. I went to bed at like 10 o'clock.
Well, I'm glad you ate ice cream. That's my favorite thing to do for any celebration, really. So the book is about a former pop star, right? Cassidy Jones, formerly known as Sassy Gloss, which is like the best name ever, who kills herself. So it's exploring the dark side of fame, sort of the humans behind the celebrity headlines and the glossy pictures. So I'm just wondering what drew you to this story?
What drew me to the story? Well, I was sorry to get heavy all of a sudden, but like I was dealing with depression at the time I was writing, and Cassidy became kind of an outlet for me. So I was feeling down and exploring that depression that I didn't realize was depression. I just thought I was dealing with a whole bunch of bad days, and the string of bad days that ended up being a string of bad months and years. And so I just thought something might be wrong with me. The idea of Cassidy came from, I was watching Spice World on TV, and it was in 2014, and it was around the same time that Mel B, who is Scary Spice, was going through this really toxic relationship that was being broadcast through all these celebrity gossip channels. And it was interesting watching her in 1997 in Spice World, like on top of the world, versus what she was dealing with in 2014 in the current world. And so I started to think about a pop group that might have peaked in the 2000s and faded into obscurity, and then something bad happened to one of the members in 2017. It was 2015 originally, but I moved it to 2017. Yeah.
So do you have any kind of background in music or in the music industry? Because to me, like the idea of creating a band seems like a fictional band sounds incredibly difficult as a fiction writer. Like it would just take a lot of courage. I'm just wondering what your background is in that way.
I have zero musical talent. I can't sing, and I knew nothing about the musical industry, but all the books that were coming out in 2014 were about people, like behind the scenes books. They were all about actors, and I was like, I don't want to do something that everyone else has done. So I decided to do a musical group, and I read a lot of musician biographies.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that really helped me out were the one by Jewel. Never Broken is the title of her memoir. And I also read Posh Spice. She has a memoir / autobiography. I read Keith Richards' biography as well. And I read a lot of books about how to break into the industry that were kind of geared towards the late 90s and early 2000s, like not the ones that were up to date for the now, but the stuff that was popular back in the days that the book is supposed to take place in. And that helped me a lot. It made a lot more sense to understand what was going on.
That's such a good idea as a source, like the kind of a manual for aspiring pop stars, right? Like what's the culture? What are the barriers? What are they thinking about? What's the language?
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you do, so not music, but you do have it, and as Jane read in your bio, like you it sounds like do really follow celebrities, like celebrity gossip and et cetera, et cetera. Has that always been the case for you? Is it something you developed like young or later in life, or?
I joined the gossip community in 2004 when I was in college, and I have not left. So they are indiscriminate in what they cover. So they just cover everybody. And, you know, I always have my favorites of people who I read a lot about. And of course, like Brittany is one of my big ones. So I'm always like, what's going on with Brittany today? She always has something going on. And I try not to look at it as like entertainment, but as just human interest.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're talking about Britney Spears for a moment, I'm not making this up. Last week, my family, in fact, got into sort of a fight about Britney Spears, which was about like what happened to her. It was actually it was like, well, where did she go? And I was like, well, she hasn't gone anywhere. She's still here. She apparently even has an album, but it was like, but we're not listening to her. My kids aren't listening to her in the way that like they're listening. And so then there was a member of the family who felt, well, this is about like she's aged out of the pop star. And then I was like, well, what about Madonna? What about da-da? And then, so anyway, to come back to that great line of Zoe Fishman's, right? Like your book is for anyone who wondered why Britney shaved her head and attacked a car with an umbrella. Like, not to give away your book, because I want everybody to go read the book. We all want to read it. But can you give us a little teaser? Like why did she, I'm sorry, I was saying Jones and it's Holmes. I don't know why.
I did the same thing. I said, sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
You know, I feel like there's somewhere in the copy that it's wrong, but it could just totally be my transference. I'm sorry. But back to Britney. So again, not to give your book away, but why did Britney, you know, attack a car with an umbrella? Can you help us?
That is something that I feel someone with like a degree in psychology should answer, and that's not me. But I do feel that she was just at the end of her tether at one point, where people were just asking too much of her, and she was not given the privacy that she needed at the time. And people were not responding to her with empathy. They were trying to use her in some way to make more money or for their own gain, you know, paparazzi taking photos of her for their own monetary interest. And I just think that she was tired of it and wanted to show that she was tired of it. And so she was like, well, you want pictures of me? And then here's a picture of me. I'm going to shave my head, you know?
Yeah.
That sort of feeling.
Yeah.
I felt for her then. Like, I didn't think it was funny at all. I thought it was heartbreaking that she was going through that.
I feel like hearing you talk about this just makes me want to read your book even more, even though I've already wanted to, just in terms of like the way that just how seriously you're taking, you know, right? Like you're saying, like these are things that people laugh about often, or it's very easy to dismiss celebrities dismiss their humanity.
Right.
And so, and I guess along with that, I'm curious, in the book, you go into not only the point of view of Cassidy, but also her former bandmates. I'm curious sort of why you made that choice, and did you know from the beginning when you started writing the book that you were going to switch points of view in that way?
I did. I started writing the book with Yumi's character, which at the time was someone different, but she turned into Yumi as I went along. I knew that it was going to be a back and forth between the present and the past. And I really wanted the reactions of what the other band members were going through, like in response to her death, in response to Cassidy's death. And I guess, I don't know, I didn't find it very hard to write it that way. I basically wrote the book as you see it, like in linear form. So it just turned out that way.
You mean like in the order in which the reader experiences it? You wrote it
Yes.
in that order. Yeah.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense to me in my own experience with writing a non-linear narrative that jumps around in time a lot. And I know that some writers do it differently than that, but that's also been my experience, is that I need to write it in the order in which it will be read. It's interesting.
Yeah, because you're adding little tidbits of information as you go along, and you have to know when to put that in. And if you write it like you write all of the past and then you start writing the present, then you have to go figure out, like, you have to unscramble it then. And that
Right.
didn't appeal to me at all.
Well, I also think there's just a way in which it's telling, I mean, that would be a different story, right? Like you could write a book that would be like, here's the past and here's the present. But when you write it in that form and then try to stick it together, you're sort of, I mean, part of how the book turns out and why it works is that those parts are in conversation with each other. And so
Right.
I think to have that laid in from the beginning makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. So do you mind talking for a minute about your photography?
Oh, sure. What about it?
Well, I've always just been really, you said that you, or I had also looked at a little bit to learn a little bit about you, that you photograph weddings. And I've always been just fascinated by wedding photographers. And I had this sense that like, I don't take photographs at all other than like on my phone and don't know anything about it. But just that wedding photographers would sort of see things that no one else sees and also sort of see things in a way that no one else sees them. And I'm curious sort of how your photography kind of influences or doesn't your writing and the other way around, like how those things work together for you.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, I do feel that wedding photographers observe like lots of little details, and they have to be really observant and I guess cognizant of people's emotions. So if a guest doesn't want to be photographed, it's kind of obvious. But if someone is angling for a little bit more photo coverage, then you're like, oh, that person is a ham, and so you want to follow that person around or that sort of thing. And I think that helps me with a lot of details in describing the characters in the book, just because weddings are a social occasion, and it's another way to socialize and be socialized. And so I was just looking around, like watching people and starting to transcribe them into characters that I saw around me. So, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, just sort of, I think you answered it.
Okay.
Just how the photography does or doesn't influence the writing or the other way. But if you have more to say, I totally.
Oh, yeah, I do. Because photography, when you take a photo, this is like well known in the photography industry. When you take a photo, you want it to be perfect in camera or as good as you can get it in camera. So you don't want to have to do a lot of post-processing work. You want to get the lighting right, you want to get the angles right, because you don't want to have to Photoshop so much or anything around. And so the term is, you can't polish a turd, is what they say in the photography industry. And it was really hard to write with that mentality in mind, because writing is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting.
Right.
And so I was trying to get it perfect on the first try, and you can't get it perfect because you don't actually know what you're writing. You're telling yourself the story first, and then you are revising so the story makes sense to someone else who's reading it,
Right.
if that makes sense.
What'd you say?
So you're polishing that turd over and over and over again.
Right. Like
yes, you are polishing a turd over and over and over again until it shines like gold.
No, and you really, it's like you need to start with the turd. It's really different. That's fascinating. And it even like just riffing on like the idea of the turd reminds me also of like Anne Lamott's idea of the shitty first draft, right? Like, so yeah, that is really interesting. Like the goal is not to start with like a finished thing and then, or I mean, that would be great, of course, if we could, but for most of us humans, it is a really different type of process. Yeah. Sorry, my son is starting to. Sam, be quiet. The nature. Well, so speaking of yelling at my child, how is it for you? I mean, this is your first book, so part of me wants to say, like, I'm so sorry it's coming out in this moment, and I really mean that. But also, like, you've now had a few months of watching those of us who've had books already come out in this moment. Like, what are you observing, and what are you trying, like in what ways I see, I mean, in what ways are you sort of finding new ways to like bring a book out into the world in a very different world?
Well, I don't have much to compare it to because I've never brought a book out in the world before. And I am sad that I haven't had like an in-person launch with an in-person signing because that was like the dream, you know. But I feel like people have really rallied around authors at this time because they can see how hard it is to get a book out in the world right now. A book. I'm holding up my book for everyone to see.
I told her, by the way, everybody to pull up her book as much as possible. She's not, it's like she's ordered to do this gorgeous.
Yes, I'm like timing it every 5 minutes. I'll bring it up.
You're a pro. So that's one thing. You've learned how to hold your book up in Zoom.
Right. Yeah, the learning curve of Zoom has been very interesting. Like I went from not knowing how to use Zoom at all to having to use Zoom like almost every day. But people have been really supportive, and I did my own kind of promo by redoing album covers on my Instagram of 1990s, like late 90s to early 2000s artists and their covers, and redoing them as myself. So it's me photoshopped into these situations, and it was a fun photo project as well as book promo, and I think a lot of people really enjoyed it. So
they're great.
I don't know if it moved the needle on people buying.
They're great. They're awesome. I was just looking at them yesterday, and they're so cool.
Yeah. I was wondering, Jane, if you have your phone near you and could hold it up, because I would be. I mean, I want to go check them out after, but it'd be very fun to see.
Yes, let's see.
It's a great idea. I really like it. I really like the idea.
Yeah,
and it works really well with the era that I wrote in. So.
What's your favorite one, Elissa? And I will put that one up.
The Britney Spears one is my favorite.
Britney Spears, yeah, that one's awesome.
That one or my NSYNC one.
Oh yeah, I think Britney easier to see. I don't know if you guys can see that. So there's
oh my god, that's amazing.
Elissa as Britney Spears.
Brittany.
That's awesome. That. Oh yeah, okay. I'm totally checking out that, and all of you should as well. That's very.
You can see it on my Instagram at Elissa Reads. So ELISSA Reads. So, yeah.
Very good. Very good. That's awesome. Plug. So maybe that wouldn't have been born if not for the pandemic. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe something.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Well, it was a pandemic project. Like we were stuck in the house, sheltering in place, and so I was like, well, if I'm just gonna see what I have in my wardrobe, and if I can recreate anything, I will. And so, I mean, the one I did a Destiny's Child one, and I cut up a T-shirt to make it into a tube top. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Speaking of your house, this rolling ladder, which I'm also going to go look at, was it there when you moved into this house? Did you have it made? Did you make it? How?
We hired a contractor. We had this really boring wall, and it was just really just taking up space, doing nothing. And I was like, we are going to make a library wall. That is my dream, and it's going to happen. And it's a huge wall with a slope. So it slopes into half of a vaulted ceiling. And so it needs a ladder for you to get up to the top of it. So we have a rolling library ladder attached to it. And it's my favorite thing in the house.
So cool. You know what's funny? I don't know if she's already said this, but Jenna Blum has a rolling ladder in her apartment in Boston. It's the only other rolling ladder in a residence that I've ever seen. And it's a goal for me. Yeah,
I think a lot of bookworms have that goal.
I have bookshelves it's making me realize this is the sad thing. In Brooklyn, I have bookshelves that are high enough that I need a ladder to get to them, but I have to carry the ladder, anyway, it's funny. Oh, right, I do have high bookshelves. There's no ladder. There's no rolling ladder.
We should talk after, because I know someone who is in New York who sells ladders. That's where I sourced my ladder from. And they're antique. So, or not antique, but they're used, but yeah. I'll give you that info later.
Awesome.
Good to know.
I would appreciate it. So I don't know is there anything that you want to share, Elissa, that I haven't asked? I just want to give you that opportunity.
I really don't know. I've been asked so many questions these past few days.
I have some questions
Oh.
I have some viewer questions if you're curious.
Oh, yeah.
Interject. So one question was from Samina. Did you listen to any music when you were writing? Did you have like you do have a playlist that goes with the book. Was this music that you were listening to?
I write in complete silence. So no, I was not listening to it. But I do want to say that like outside of when I wasn't writing, I was listening to that music because I have not left the 2000s really. I still listen to Backstreet Boys all the time. I love NSYNC. I still listen to Britney, you know. So yes and no, but not while I was actually actively writing.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And another question was, in addition to reading you read memoirs and autobiographies and stuff, did you get to interview any musicians or bands? Or did you do that as part of
No. I don't actually know many musicians or bands, which is weird because I'm in Austin. So I should know a lot of musicians and bands.
Yeah.
But I felt, even though I do know a few, like I have some friends, and I did ask a friend about what the inside of a radio station looked like because she had been in a radio station recently, and the book opens in a radio station.
Okay.
I thought that the experience of being a musician in the 2015s era would be different than a musician in the 2000s. And so I didn't want to get mixed, like confused signals and information. Because what's normal now was not naturally normal back then.
The industry has changed a lot, and
yes.
the way, I mean, in the early 2000s, we were all still buying CDs, and that was how you,
exactly.
You know, yeah. So
there was no streaming, there was no YouTube.
Right. People didn't have to have a social media presence. More people went out to clubs. So
exactly.
Yeah, those were the days. Okay, great. So we do have more questions, but Anna, if you have stuff that you want to ask, I don't want to
give people a chance. It's great. That's okay. Awesome. This is like the best use of this forum. So
yeah, people are engaged. This is good. Okay. Follow-up question on the listening to music. Do any songs or albums remind you of any specific characters?
Ooh, interesting.
Theme song for like if you could pick a theme song for a character. I'm just riffing here on their question now. So
pick a theme song. That would take a lot more thought because there's a whole catalog in my head where I'd have to like go through and think and maybe I don't know. The only thing I can think of is like Mariah Carey Butterfly. For a certain character that I will not name because I want it to be a surprise for the people who read. So if you have read it and you think you know who it is, just keep it to yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Or maybe they can message you on Instagram or something and
exactly.
See if they got it right. Yeah, it'd be fun. Awesome. Very cool. So does your next are you working on something else? That was another question.
I am very slowly. I am a slow writer, so I deliberately did not sign a 2-book contract because I knew that I could not work within a deadline that would be super fast. So I'm taking my time and writing something that's kind of in the same universe, but not the sequel. So it's a universe where the gloss existed, but it's still contemporary.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the actual band is there.
They exist in like history. People are like, oh yeah, and gloss was really big back in the 2000s. That sort of thing.
I love that. Like, continuing with the world that you've already created, the fictional.
Yeah, like a little Easter egg for people. Like if you hadn't read my first book and you read the second one, it would not it wouldn't mean anything. But if you did read it and you knew,
you'd
be like, oh, gloss, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
There's a whole book about that.
That's awesome. That's very cool. All right, well, I have a question for both of you, if you don't mind my posing a question for both of you. This is kind of related though to what you were just talking about, Elissa. What's it like? Do you find, because I know as a writer myself, I struggled with this, trying to write in the midst of a pandemic and so much, you know, that's happening around the country with protests, with the impending election, with it can be really hard to focus and to be generative, especially if you're working on creating new material, right? So I'm curious to know from each of you what it's like trying to write in the midst of a pandemic. So Elissa, if you,
Terrible.
yeah.
It's terrible. I can't even concentrate on watching simple TV shows. So I'm having a really hard time concentrating on like where the thread of my thought is trying to go when I'm writing. So it's slow going.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I feel like my moods, which are never like the most, you know, it's not like I'm ever sort of like always just one thing, but I feel like there's just more extremity in a given day to how, you know, it's just like very intense. And so I'll hit sort of a stride of some kind, but then it's just gone like 10 minutes later rather than 2 hours later. And I'm very dependent on the Freedom application, which makes me like blocks me from checking blocks me from whatever I want it to block me. And I feel more, I finally have gotten myself back in the practice of turning that on, which feels like a huge accomplishment. And I've been for the last like couple weeks, which again is really recent in the scheme of this, I've been meditating again, like doing headspace every morning, just 10 minutes. And I cannot say that it's having like some miraculous effect, but it's certainly not hurting. And it feels like it's just like another step in trying to kind of like remember that I can find ways to kind of clear the space a little bit, at least in my head. But yeah, no, it's really hard.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. There's so much noise out there, and if you need silence, and yeah, you can't get rid of the noises in your head. It's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see if we have any last viewer questions. Viewers, if you have questions, you can shoot them our way. I think that may be it though for questions. Let's see, anything else that you wanted, any last minute questions, any last minute? Oh, okay. Well, I have a last minute thing that I just want to make sure I don't forget to say, that if you want to buy, for example, The Unraveling of Cassidy Holmes, which we're looking at again right now. Awesome. Good job with the holding up the book cover. I love it.
Thank you.
You can get that. One of Elissa's hometown, well, Austin bookshops is Book People in Austin. So if you're nearby, or you can even hit them online to order from there. Great store. And for Anna's books, including The Book of V, Leaving Lucy Pear, and the, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the Little Bride.
The Little Bride. It's okay.
The Little Bride. Those are available also. Belmont Books has some signed copies of Lucy Pear, Belmont Books in Massachusetts. And again,
a Book of V, not of
Lucy
Pear.
I'm sorry. Yes, a Book of V. Yes. Yes, they have signed copies of the Book of V, so you can grab that there. You can also always grab our authors' books through our storefront on bookshop.org, and the proceeds help go to independent bookstores. So we hope that you will pick up both of these authors' books and check them out.
Yes, I'm going right now to go get The Unraveling of Cassidy Holmes from Book People. I'm very excited to have a signed copy, and yeah, really excited.
Awesome. Yes, I am too. My to read list is like, I'm gonna need a rolling ladder for my to read list at some point. So thank you both so much. This has been great. Love hearing about your book, Elissa, and I'm just so excited to read it. And thank you, Anna, for taking the time to be with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks to all of you for watching along. We'll see you next time.